Do you know the 4 ways a strong brand enhances cash flows? Do you know how to build a brand? Trini Amador supplies the technique.
This is the Economics for Entrepreneurs podcast, a project of the Mises Institute, applying the principles of economics to start, grow, and manage your business. For free tools, resources, key takeaways, and actionable insights from each episode, visit Mises.org/E4E Pod. Now, here's Hunter Hastings.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Austrian economics recognizes that all value is created inside the consumer's mind, and that value creation is subjective. Another word for that is emotional. How the customer feels about your offering is what determines the amount of value you can create. Remember that word feeling. It's what your business is aiming to create in customers, a feeling. That value in the consumer's mind, in that feeling, is monetized as a revenue flow, the amount of money they exchange in return for the experience you facilitate for them. One of the most powerful tools in your toolkit for the creation of revenue flows like this is a brand. A brand is a shortcut to consumer value, or in other words, it's a promise of value. Consumers see your brand, your name, your logo, the paint job on the side of your truck, and instantly perceive that it represents an experience that they desire. A brand is a financial device for superior cash flow. In fact, a brand improves cash flows at least 4 ways. Cash flows from brands are higher. Brands can support and sustain premium prices compared to rivals, and the price elasticity of strong brands is lower, suggesting that they can raise prices with less or any volume loss. Cash flows from brands are faster. Strong brands can use brand reputation to build higher volume and more growth. They can also utilize brand extensions to cover the market more fully or move into additional markets. Cash flows from brands have longer duration. Many of a brand's fixed costs, like advertising and marketing campaigns and a customer service team, are quite stable and sustainable, and can sustain high market shares over an extended period. There is a long-term value to a branded business. Cash flows from brands are less volatile. Over time, brands can economize on both fixed and working capital and achieve scale economies in plant and distribution. Suppliers and distributors become integrated and locked in. Cash flows become more reliable. Overall, this means higher asset utilization and lower cost of capital. Brands are great financial tools. Brands require investment to get to this level of financial return, and especially the investment of time. You can't just buy brand strength in the same way that you can buy a computer or a truck or a building. You need to understand value creation principles and the mind of the consumer. Fortunately, there is an entrepreneurial method to brand building, one that capitalizes on Austrian principles, beginning with empathic diagnosis, which we reviewed with Peter Klein in episode number 5 of Economics for Entrepreneurs. Today, we are very fortunate to be able to bring back Trini Amador, who is one of the foremost experts on brands and brand building. He is a consultant to leading brand owners worldwide, and he also likes to help more local and small brands in his home county of Sonoma in California. He is the owner and principal at BHC Consulting, as well as the proprietor of a world-class wine brand, Graciana. Trini, hello.
Hey, Hunter, how are you?
Good. Welcome back to Economics for Entrepreneurs. Last time we talked about the role of values in consumer sentiment and consumer behavior, and you told us how important that is in the process of brand building. Mm-hmm. And some of our listeners noticed that you mentioned a process of yours that you utilize for brand building and brand design, and they said, can we learn more about that? And you were kind enough to say yes, and here we are. So maybe we should start with your definition of a brand. I gave a definition in my introduction that was from a financial and economic standpoint, but you're an expert from a marketing and business strategy standpoint. So please tell us how you define a brand from that viewpoint.
Thanks a lot for asking me back, Hunter. It's good to be back with you. So in your introduction, you had mentioned that a brand is a shortcut for consumers to perceive value, and that a brand promises value, because only the consumer decides whether that promise is kept. So I really want to start there, and that is that an entrepreneur must think of their product or their service as a promise that has or has to deliver value. So an entrepreneur must manage that promise. It's a promise to identify, to understand, to make different than other products and services, and to invest in, or you make it meaningful to a target audience. And we'll be talking about target audiences more later. But we'll talk more about how customers perceive that value later. But a healthy brand delivers superior cash flows compared to other products and services in several different ways. It's better cash flows that are higher, faster, longer, and less volatile, because we focus on that value creation as a route to revenue. So let's talk about brand assets that deliver value to a customer and profit to you.
Good. So you're right in the center of Austrian Capital Theory there, Trini, about assets that turn into monetization streams because they deliver value to a customer. So before we get going, I just want to make sure that you're talking about brand building that's open to all kinds of businesses, large and small, starting up and mature. Is that correct?
That's right. So building a brand is for any business that has customers, Hunter. If you have a customer, they expect a product or a service promise. Your competitors are making a promise to your customers, so you need to do as well. Yours needs to be relevant to your customer and differentiated. These are two words that we're going to talk a lot about today. So your promise needs to be relevant to your customers, and it needs to be differentiated. So if you're unaware about what your brand promise is, then your customers are going to make it up on their own. What that means is that your competitors are making a promise to them, and if you're not making a promise, your consumers are going to evaluate whether an offering is going to bring them value on their own terms. So the brand helps them with that valuation, which brings me back to the brand owner's need to manage what their brand stands for, what you want it to mean, and what you want it to mean to whom.
So every entrepreneur should consider themselves a brand owner, to use that term. And what would you say are the implications of that? How does a brand owner think and act, maybe differently from just a business owner? How does it change their approach to business?
That's a really great question. So building our brand is a way of thinking, or it's an approach to business. Building a brand is more than just building a business. It's about deeply understanding the needs of your target audience, your customer, and deeply understanding what they need and why. It's the why that is the most important. Why do they need your service or your product? It sounds odd sometimes or hard to do. Your goal must be to create a positive emotional feeling about your offer in your customer's mind. So it's a different way of thinking about business, and it's mandatory for you to do this in order to be successful. So it means that a brand owner needs to manage his brand in order to succeed. Because if you don't manage it, your customers don't know what you stand for, and they'll come up with what they believe that you stand for on their own. So one example is Kraft Heinz. It's a company that owns many brands, and we're familiar with many of the brands that they have. But they've been neglecting brand management recently and preferring to do a lot of cost cutting. So they've been very focused on the shareholder and returning cash to their shareholders. But they have some great brands like mac and cheese, for example. So kids love this. It's great fun. It's an icon. But now it's viewed as old-fashioned and sort of out of sync with modern trends because the brand owner has neglected to keep these brands updated. So Kraft Heinz has written down billions of dollars in value from their balance sheet. Should we talk about another one?
Yeah, I'm just going to emphasize that. That's a great connection between brand asset value, the financial part, and brand value, the emotional part. And they've broken that connection, it seems.
Another brand that comes to mind is Waste Management. So this is has been a well-managed from a reputation standpoint. They focus on green contributions they make in their trash pickup and recycling and providing the service to other entrepreneurs of sustainably and responsibly managing their waste flows. So years ago, Waste Management, the company, before they began putting more effort into managing their brand perception, was really just perceived as kind of a bottom feeder brand. They were providing services that were perceived at the bottom end of the needs chain. But now they're perceived in a more elevated role because of their brand focus on green responsibility.
Right, so they're actively, as you said earlier, shaping that perception that customers and consumers have of them.
That's right, because when we're in brand management, our role is to manage folks' attitudes about our brand.
Good.
Should we talk about another?
Well, I always think about Alexa in this modern time. It seems to me that they haven't educated consumers on how to think of them as kind of nifty new tech, but really they never built a brand around Alexa, and they didn't have the emotional reactions shaped, and now it's associated with surveillance and eavesdropping and spying, and it's getting a negative brand perception. So maybe those attitudes are out of control now, and the brand owner's got some work to do. Is that an example?
I think that's a great point. And, it's also endemic with a lot of technology brands that they think that the technology is going to do the work and that everything is going to just sort of work out. But what's happened is that, Alexa, to your point, has sort of gotten a little bit out of hand, and the brand has become something that they weren't expecting, and they didn't do a good job of managing. They haven't been doing a good job of managing out of that.
Right. It's mildly toxic, I would say, today. So let's move on with those examples, Trini. Thank you. And I know you've got a method. You teach it to brand builders all over the globe. It works in every culture. It works on every product. It works in every service category. And I know that you have assured us that we can fit that method to our entrepreneurs who are listening. We're going to do it very quickly today. I know it takes teams a long time to do this really well, but we're going to provide the basics. And for those of you who are listening, there's a free graphic that you can download from the E4E Pod website at Mises.org, and it will illustrate the framework that Trini's going to talk about. But for those of you who don't have that in hand, we'll just try to describe it in words as well. So, Trini, I think it starts with two parts, right? Two structures, two columns.
That's right. So there's two columns, two elements, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier. One is relevance, and the other is differentiation. And relevance is there's 6 boxes overall. There's 3 sections. So there's 3 sections in relevance, and there's 3 sections in differentiation. So if folks are visualizing this, it's 6 boxes, 3 boxes on the left, 3 boxes on the right. On the left are the relevance sections, and on the right is differentiation.
Okay, good. I think we have the picture. So let's start on the left-hand side column, the relevance column. It's central to brand building, you tell us, but it's also central to economics because it speaks to the individualism, the focus on the people as the analytical unit.
That's right. So the first box is purposely called the core target. And actually, I just want to mention the 3 boxes. So the first is the core target. Below that is core needs and insights. And below that is the competitive frame of reference. So we're going to talk about those 3. So the first box we call the core target, and it's specifically called core target because many brand owners think that the more folks that they target, the more they're going to sell. And I know many of your listeners are thinking this. The more people I can reach, the more business I'm going to do. But actually the opposite is true. So the adage that you can't be all things to all people is applied here, especially in this day and age, and there's a reason for that, and it's because we have Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and Zencaster and television and podcast and radio and satellite radio and. There's just way too many channels to reach folks the way that we used to, and because fragmentation is too pervasive. So it's now nearly impossible to get anyone's attention. So to understand your consumer deeply, you have to target them narrowly. So the net of that is that carefully choosing the right core target that expresses a need for your product or service and that most likely aligns with your core values of your brand that you're building. So we call this segmentation. There's many types of customers, but which is the best to target? So I'll give you an example. There's the value buyer. Everybody knows someone who is always out to get a good deal. And many of us probably all know that a buyer who's out seeking to impress. They buy things because they want folks to look at them and be socially recognized. There's also a buyer that seeks variety. Today they like chocolate, tomorrow they like vanilla. And there's one that needs to understand the inner workings of your offer. And there's names for all of these segments. But a brand owner can go target their customer very narrowly if they like. Only customers that buy seasonally, for example, or help them feel a certain way, or for this reason or for that. Having the ability to do that is a competitive advantage. So that's the core target.
One of the terms that you sometimes see, again, associated with tech brands more often perhaps, but they talk about personas as the target, which is kind of a compilation of demographics and attitudes and behaviors and click streams and things like that. Is that the same thing, or is it slightly different?
It is the same thing. So it is possible for you to personify your customer, so that's what that means. Basically, a great way to do that would be to get your team together, and you can build a viewpoint about what that customer looks like. You can actually pick a photo of this person. You could name her or name him, and you can make a list of the kinds of attributes and characteristics of your customer and say, this is who our core target looks like. That's very valuable.
And just the last point on this, just to emphasize, the key word, I take it, is core. You're trying to get down to the most solid, the most tightly targeted user that you can. You can always expand from that later, but it's key to get that core best user.
That's correct.
Good. Let's move down the relevance column. And in the second box, you're highlighting the step from identifying the target to thinking about getting an insight about their motivations. Tell us about that.
Right. So the next step or the next box is called core needs and insights. And it's very important. I know this doesn't sound so important, but to a brand owner, it's critical that we have empathy. That means that we deeply need to understand what's motivating our customer to behave the way that they do. So sure, a customer buys your service because they want their lawn mowed or their pool cleaned or their forklift or their network running. They buy your product because they need office furniture or paper products. They use your laundromat. They hire your legal, your accounting services, your trucking company, construction company, buy restaurant equipment, your window shades, etc. I'm trying to list. I want to make sure that everybody who's listening who has one of these types of businesses or any business who has a customer understands that their customers want to buy that product or service because they need that, but they want more than that. They want much more. So the process step is to ask yourself, and also ostensibly to your customers, why? It's critical to ladder up to what we refer to as the ultimate why, and that explains why they're needing this product or service. So you have to have this deep understanding of what's motivating the need and the purchase of yours and your competitors' products and services, meaning having a deep understanding about why your customers are doing business with your competitors is also very important. It keeps you competitively fit. So we call this process the 5 whys. I've said why, but it's really why. So yeah. A customer wants, let's just use new window shades as an example on his or her commercial building. So why is that? Well, the old ones aren't functioning well. They're just not working anymore. So why is that important? That's the second why. Well, it's a matter of workspace comfort, lighting, and heat. Well, why is that important? The third why. Well, because of the comfort and therefore the efficiency of the workforce and workplace satisfaction. Well, why is that important? Look, that's the fourth why already. Well, it's about effective business management, getting the most productivity out of our resources that we own and maximizing our capabilities. Well, why is that important? Well, it's all about the sense of achievement of the entrepreneur, the person who's buying the window shades. Because being a great business CEO by allocating resources most effectively and making your workforce happy. So this would drive a window shade manufacturer to sell on the basis of delivering business efficiency and employee satisfaction along with a window shade. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great example. And you do this every time, right? 5 whys, every insight that you're trying to get to understand a customer's motivation, you always do this.
That's right. What you're trying to do is get down to the base reason why someone is using your service, buying your service or your product. There's more reasons than just that they need a new forklift or that they need to get their shirts laundered. And
then you can relate to them on that emotional, values-based, real reason.
That's right. And I'll tell you the reason why is because there's someone who also has a laundromat, and they do clean shirts too. So what you've got to do is, this is just a barrier to entry. When you're in business as a laundromat, or pick your business, anybody else is going to deliver some at least base level of service and base level of product development, product delivery. So you've got to understand what's driving your customer to behave that way and have that need, so you can meet their needs at a higher level.
Yeah, we like that idea of the higher level, always trying to find that higher level. So thank you for that. And let's move on to the third box under the first column, and I think you called that the competitive frame of reference.
That's right. So we generally try to think of the competitive frame of reference in 3 steps. So this is very easy for a brand owner to do. Who am I competing with in general? And generally the answer to that is, it's anybody who offers A, B, and C, for example, this product service at your value range or at your service range. So I'm competing with pretty much anybody in this sort of broad range. And the second then is, well, who am I competing with specifically? And I can tell you right now, every single one of your brand owners who's listening absolutely understands who their direct 1 or 2 competitors are, and what they're offering. And then the third step is, well, if I do a good job of meeting sort of the general competitive landscape, and I'm doing a good job of competing against my direct competitor, my 1 or 2 direct competitors, then eventually you want to state, well, in that third step, well, if I do well against those competitors, what will I do now to grow my business? Will I add more competitors that I'm competing against, or will I broaden up my core target a little bit? Remember, we said that very narrowly targeting is important, but if, from a competitive frame of reference standpoint, if I'm doing a really good job against my competitors, it now gives you the opportunity to start to broaden the core target segment. And what that does is all 3 of these steps allow you to then think about where you're going to be growing your business in the future. And then the other thing is that in economic value standpoint, there's usually these 3 simple tests. So the first question that a brand owner would ask is, does my product or service have value at all in my category of need? So do my customers see value? The second is, does it have more value than a direct or an indirect substitute? So does it have more value than a direct substitute that someone could go out there and buy, or maybe there is an indirect substitute that people are taking advantage of, and does mine have more value than that? And then does it have enough value to compel folks to purchase our product or service now rather than later? Mm-hmm. Because we all know in business that we're trying to make a sale today and not tomorrow.
Yeah, so thanks for that competitive analysis, Trini. And we also look at it through the economic lens, which is another way of saying the same thing. Does my product or service have value at all? Does the customer feel any value in my category of need, as opposed to just rejecting it outright? So when you go and try and sell something online, when you get no return, you get nobody buying, then you haven't created any value. Does it have more value than a direct or indirect substitute? So if I'm selling beer, the direct substitute might be another competitor's beer, but also it could be a Diet Coke or a glass of wine. So I've got to think about indirect substitutes. And does it have enough value to compel purchase now rather than later? Because one of the things the consumer can do is not buy now and postpone that until later. So you've got to hit all those economic buttons. So talking about products and brands that the consumer in the core target buys now, the way that economists think about that Trini, is they're buying, but they might have some dissatisfaction. In fact, we talk about dissatisfaction as a great resource for us out there, because if we understand it and we can ask the 5 whys to understand it more deeply, then we know what we're trying to do to improve value. So can you give us an analogy maybe or an example of an area of dissatisfaction in a product category?
Sure. Before I do, I just want to comment on that, and that is that many of the brand owners who are listening today got into business because they saw a customer or a target group that was not being served by something, and they thought, hey, I can serve that better. So I know that a lot of your listeners can relate to that. So about dissatisfaction, one great example is in the sporting goods and apparel area, and we're going to be talking about sporting goods apparel a little bit later. So I think it's a really good question to serve up. So what are some of the ways that folks are dissatisfied with their sporting goods apparel? And I've been thinking about this, and there's a long laundry list of the kinds of things that folks can be dissatisfied with in the things that they wear when they're being active. So one is that it doesn't fit, it's not comfortable, it doesn't wick away the sweat, and it makes them feel damp and sweaty. There's nowhere for them to put their phone or their keys. They hate to leave those things behind because that's their life. Those are very important to them. So they want to carry them, but they want to maybe hang them from their clothes, but then they're going to bounce and bother them. So their life is getting in the way of their workout. So maybe their apparel is old-fashioned or it's uncool. Maybe the design's not that great. It could be insufficient weather protection, too heavy for running. So the insight, meaning what motivates the customer to behave the way that they do, might be something like there's just so many potential distractions and barriers to a regular and complete workout that I need everything to be just right and perfectly comfortable to be able to get the courage and the determination and the commitment to maintain my workout regimen. And I think a lot of folks that are listening here can relate to this, meaning that they need everything to be just right in order for them to complete something. So some of your listeners are thinking, yeah, when I get into my office, my desk needs to be looking just a certain way for me to actually jump into my day. And many people, in order for them to be able to get the courage to go out and do that workout every day, everything has to be just right.
Yeah, so that's an example of an insight, you would say, right, for the core target. If your core target is a intense runner and they're equipment conscious, that everything has to be just perfect, otherwise they're highly dissatisfied. We might look at it as something minor, but they look at it as something that's getting in the way of their workout or their lifestyle. Trini Amador and I are talking about building a strong brand, specifically constructing a brand foundation using his 6 boxes technique. The technique is revealed in full and illustrated with case studies in our Austrian Entrepreneur's Journey online course. In addition to this technique, there are 12 more steps to building a strong, growing, big business as an entrepreneur. You can find the Austrian Entrepreneur's Journey course at E4EPod.com/journey. That's the letter E, the number 4, letter E, pod.com/journey. We think you'll enjoy it and benefit from it. Now back to the second part of the brand foundation. So we've completed the relevance pillar, right? We've got a core target, we've got some insights into them, and we know the competitive frame of reference, what they're buying now. So let's explain the other side of the brand framework, differentiation.
So differentiation, well, in the past broadcast or podcast, we'd been emphasizing the value of striving for uniqueness. So it's different than competing, because being competitive is just not enough today. Your product or your service has to have perceived value that's derived from a set of benefits that are mixed up with the price, but many other factors come in, right?
Well, like what?
Well, like these functional and emotional benefits, and the ultimate benefit that might be seeking in your relationship with your listeners offer to their customers. So also, to be clear, when we reference competitiveness, we mean competing with other companies. However, when we reference making sure your brand is unique, we're referring to make sure that it's unique or make your brand unique to the consumer.
Right, and that's a perception on their part. So the top box on the relevance side, the left-hand side was the core target. The top box on the differentiation side is what?
Well, so the top box is the brand promise. So what that means is that a brand is only a promise. It's a shortcut to an understanding of an entire set of features and attributes and emotions and values. Lots of things are tied up into this, into what a brand promise is. So our job is to find a unique way to deliver on what we think of as the highest value benefit that a brand can deliver on. Usually it's emotional. And for example, Nike delivers great quality and style, and they help you run faster and jump higher. And it also delivers on this emotional benefit of feeling confident, or even a higher value of feeling a sense of accomplishment. So after all, that's what just do it means, right? That means I've accomplished something. So at the end of the day, that Nike can help you feel better. It delivers on the functional needs of making you run faster and jump higher, and it's got great style and so on. And it delivers on these emotional benefits of confidence, but even higher than that, I can feel like I've accomplished something. So the exercising that we were talking about a little bit earlier, you were able to get that done. So I want to test that. Hunter, I want you to say some brands, and let's get your customers or your listeners to think of what comes to mind when they think of that brand, and then we're going to double back and see how well we did together. Okay?
Okay, go ahead.
How about if you say the brand name, and we'll talk about what we think the brand promise is.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to those ones that we highlighted in the beginning as examples of brands that are well or badly managed. So mac and cheese from Kraft. Right.
So on macaroni and cheese, well, of course, it tastes yummy. If you're a kid, you know, it has a great taste. But the promise that this brand should be making to mom is that your kids are going to love this nourishing, this wholesome meal more than anything else that you can serve them. So love is a very important emotional driver in this case. Nourishment is important to moms. A wholesome meal. And more than anything else is the differentiator that is driving mac and cheese and its promise.
And by definition, more than anything else is unique. Yeah. I think I mentioned waste management as well, the refuse service.
Sure. So, when waste management comes by, they just come and do it. So it's the easiest pickup and removal today of every kind of waste for the most sustainable and green tomorrow. So easiest in this case is the superlative that is differentiating, and also this idea about most sustainable and green tomorrow. So those are the two drivers of this brand promise that make it unique.
And I mentioned Alexa, I think. Can you do Alexa?
No.
Well, I think Alexa is saying that we are placing you on the cutting edge of convenience. We are the most convenience that you can possibly have. Your every desire for convenience, whether it's asking me to play music or deliver something from Whole Foods or to tell you what the weather is or whether the freeway is blocked, Alexa gives you the most convenience you can have. How about that?
Yeah, so I would agree with that. So it's not only the most convenience, but the most convenience is what the outcome is, but it's also easy as well, because Alexa is just sitting there on the kitchen counter or in your bedroom or wherever, and your interface is the easiest. So it's most convenience makes it unique, and easiest also, I think, is an important part of that promise. So I'll buy that.
Okay. Another one I like, because I've noticed their advertising tagline recently is Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, and it's a very in-your-face tagline. It says, "Not sorry." What is that about?
Right. So, well, I know a lot about this brand because Reese's is important in our household. So not sorry is about indulge in your ability to indulge. So that is that you're making those decisions and you don't have to apologize for wanting to indulge. So this promise is about being the most indulgent indulgence. And it's also about being very happy. So when they say happiest and most indulgent indulgence in that promise, then those are quite differentiating.
So the promise is demonstrating something unique, and you talked about the need to seek uniqueness or push towards uniqueness, and we've used words like only and best and highest, a superlative. Is that correct?
That's right.
And it needs to be real. It needs to be genuine.
That's correct.
Good. Well, if anybody out there was thinking of their own brands and wants to get the answers for what their brand promise is, ask us in Mises.business, which is our LinkedIn page, or on Mises for Business and Facebook. So Trini, I'm a landscaper. How do I design that brand promise?
Well, let's think. So you want to be unique. So it's possible that you would say you're the only landscaper. So there's that superlative word, because we use only, best, highest, fastest, etc., happiest. So you might say you're the only landscaper that replies to calls 24 hours a day, or you're the only tire shop that carries a specific in-demand brand. Maybe you're the only therapist that's trained in a certain modality in your area. But it's critical that you only make a promise that you can keep. And of course, it's a promise to that core target that we've been talking about, not to everyone in the whole world. So the relationship bond to the core target is strengthened by making that promise.
Okay, great. So now we have a brand promise. Does that mean we've created a brand? We've got to make sure the brand keeps the promise, right?
We have not created a brand with a promise, but we have gotten through most of the steps, and it's sort of all of these boxes work together to deliver on the brand. But it is important to make sure the brand keeps its promise. Otherwise, it's not going to survive. So one of the brands that comes to mind, and we were talking about athletic wear earlier, is a brand called Wolaco. It's WOLACO. And what that stands for is Way of Life Athletic Company. WOLACO, Wolaco, Way of Life Athletic Company. You know, it was created by this young entrepreneur who loved exercising, but he realized that he couldn't run without his phone and his keys jangling around in his running gear, and he couldn't find any shorts that were accommodating that. So he created these form-fitting pockets into compression wear. So, Hunter, do you know what compression wear is?
I'm thinking it's like Spanx for men.
Okay, well, we'll put that in your listeners' heads for a moment, but it is sort of like that. So it is the very tight-fitting athletic wear. It's these everyday necessities that our entrepreneur developed for. He wanted to have all of those things with you while you were being active and running and the like. So it's particularly your keys and your phone, for example. So Wolaco's brand promise is empowering the pursuit of personal growth through an active way of life. So they know that this core target, this one group of people who are maniacal about wanting to have their active growth and their active way of life, and they feel that if they are active, that they are going to grow as a person. So the innovations that Wolaco has put forward gives you efficiency to move whenever and however you need. So it is a very high level promise, because I can be a better person through my active way of life. And it also is a brand that delivers on this promise too. So who are you delivering that to? Wolaco is targeting this group of these fitness buffs that we talk about. They have this drive to exercise, and it's a drive in them that makes the rest of their life balanced and fulfilling. So the idea of leveling your athletic wear to empower you to grow as a person because you have an active life, that is differentiating. And they further follow up by saying that this functional benefit of their athletic wear is allowing your lifestyle, which means your phone, for example, can travel with you even though you're being active.
Wow, that's really a great insight, Trini. So personal growth through an active way of life, and that conjures an image. And then you talked about a deep understanding who those people are, which is box 1 and box 2 on the other side, the relevance side. So I think we're getting the connections. So,
but what's important, Hunter, is that you folks listening are thinking, wait a minute, these guys are selling running shorts or athletic wear, and they're talking about personal growth through an active way of life, and the answer is yes. And the reason why is because Wallacco went through the steps of why. When you answer all 5 of the whys, you start realizing that there's more to it than just a pair of gym shorts.
Understood, and that becomes a whole brand. There's a lot of places they can go with that beyond athletic wear. So the second box in the differentiation pillar, I think, is brand delivery, which I think of as how the brand keeps the promise it makes. Is that correct?
That's right. So in the way that we have communicated the idea of assembling a unique collection of resources, there's assets, there's knowledge, talents, processes, all that in combination are able to deliver this unique value that the customer is seeking. So we say that we're aligned with the customer's need. And this brand delivery is the next step. It's even more precise and powerful. It delivers the solution rather than just being aligned. So delivery is a very special capability created by brand building. This is all to say that the brand delivery section now translates this unique brand promise into the way that we communicate and also present the brand. So we do that through features, which are tangible, and the attributes of the brand, which are intangible. And we also develop something called a communication platform, meaning what do we need to say every time to ensure that this brand promise is clear, and even something called the reason to believe is the 4th section in this brand delivery, meaning why should I believe that you can deliver on this brand promise? So I want to just stay with Wallacco for a minute, and it's an athletic compression wear company that empowers a group of highly engaged fitness enthusiasts. That's what they are. So some of the features that are unique to them are these purposeful pockets to carry your everyday things like phones and keys. It's in a safe and secure and comfortable way. And by the way, you see how safe and secure and comfortable are functional and are as functional and emotional benefits. That means that when something's safe, when it is secure, and it is comfortable, that's meeting not only your functional needs of taking care of your phone, but also the emotional ones as well. Mm-hmm. So in this case, I'm calling them purposeful pockets because that's tangible. You can see it and you can feel it. The other thing is there's some attributes of this brand in Wallacco because it's a youthful brand, and youth is not something that's tangible, but it definitely is an attribute of this brand. It also is very powerful, and it's engaging. So these are intangibles, but they also accrue to this imagery and to the delivery of this promise, which is empowering the pursuit of personal growth through an active way of life. Now we're really getting into brand building, Hunter, because we're layering on all of the elements of having a deep understanding of our core target, and then knowing what's driving them or motivating them to behave the way that they are, and then understanding who I'm competing with, and then putting forward a brand promise that is meaningful to that core target. And now I'm in the brand delivery activating that brand promise. So the next step in the brand delivery is the key communication platform. So in other words, what do we need to say to convince the core target that we can deliver this promise? So in this case, for Wallacco, they might say, Wallacco liberates your workout, for example. I think they can push that a little bit harder. So liberating your workout is just one part. What else might they say?
Well, it might be something like liberate your body and mind, or liberate your world, or maybe the liberation idea can be expanded.
Yes, I think that's right. So liberating your workout is narrow to just putting on these compression shorts and limited, I think, just to that experience. But if their promise is really about you fulfilling your life through this active way of life, I think that their communication platform could be broader like that, like you just said. I think this idea of liberating your body and mind or liberating your world is quite good. So the last thing that we would develop for brand delivery is something called the RTB, or the reason to believe. So this is why we believe that Wallacco can deliver on their promise. Why is it? So in this case, since they're innovators in the compression gear space, Wallaco's reason to believe might be something like, Wallaco are pioneers of the fastest growing compression gear company in the world. So when you hear that Wallaco is this pioneer of the fastest growing compression gear company in the world, that really gives you the feeling that they're able to deliver on that brand promise of empowering your pursuit of personal growth through an active way of life.
Perhaps also it could be something like the technology they use or something like that, right? It's some believable reason that I can get into my head that, yep, I can believe these people.
Right.
I just want to drill down on one thing you said. You talked about the key communication platforms, what the brand says. So I just want to make sure I understand. That can be the website, which most people have. It could be in our Facebook page or our Facebook advertising if we do that. It could be the side of the truck. It could be on the menu in the restaurant. The communication platform is everywhere we encounter the consumer or the customer. Is that correct?
That's right. It's very important to keep those consistent, meaning that I want to have a consistent message that helps the consumer understand that I'm able to deliver on my promise, and it needs to be activated or executed across all of those platforms consistently.
So the entrepreneur should look at that as an objective party would look at it and say, are these all saying the same things? Are they all contributing?
That's right.
Good. And then the third box on the differentiation pillar, Trini, when you were first here, you talked about values in building a brand. And we did a needs chain, a means-end chain getting to the highest value. So is this where we're bringing in the brand representing values that our customers prefer? Tell us about this sixth box.
Yeah, so let's link the last box on the differentiation side is called brand character. And so let's link that to the highest values. So a brand with a certain character can deliver on the highest values. But also a brand with character is one that people can relate to on an emotional level. So it personifies the brand. We talked about this personification idea earlier. We want to personify the brand and make it relatable. We generally recommend that there's 3 brand characteristics to personify in a brand foundation. So for your listeners, if they have a landscaping business, for example, they may want their brand to be characterized as a professional brand that is consistent and it's creative, for example. So professionalism is a characteristic to your core target that says, I want my landscaper to be professional because they have a deep understanding that I don't. And they want it to be consistent because I want them to show up and get the work done so that my lawn or my yard or my landscaping always looks great. And I also want them to be creative because I don't want it to be blah. I would like it to be differentiated from my neighbor, for example. But for Wallaco, 3 characteristics that the brand might live up to deliver on its brand promise. And I keep saying the brand promise over and over again because I really want your listeners to understand this. This is a compression gear active aware company, and their brand promise is empowering the pursuit of personal growth through an active way of life. So some characteristics they might have that they want you to feel about their brand might be about being powerful, for example. So this idea of you going out there and exerting your power or demonstrating how powerful you are. Maybe it's about adventure. So that is trying new things and always pushing the boundaries. And the last could be about balance, because in the brand promise, it is very clear that we're trying to empower this pursuit of personal growth. And so a pursuit of personal growth to me is another way of saying fulfillment or personal fulfillment. And so balance could be a part of that. So I might say that the Wallaco brand character would be, it's a powerful brand that's adventurous and balanced.
And for the target audience, that means if I relate to the brand, I feel powerful. I can do the workout. I feel the adventure of always pushing myself for this pursuit of growth, and I feel balanced. I'm not letting myself down by overworking and under-exercising. So
if the brand is doing its job, then the brand is really giving permission to this core target to feel powerful, adventurous, and balanced.
Well, terrific, Trini. That's quite a journey you've taken us through. Thank you very much. The two pillars of relevance and differentiation, and the three elements in each one of those make up, I think, do you call it the brand foundation or brand essence?
Right. I mean, you could call it either, but I think of it as a brand foundation, but it is, in fact, the essence of the brand.
Okay, good. So we'll give listeners a template for that. But step back a bit. We've been really into a lot of details here. You've practiced this brand building and building foundations all over the world with all kinds of brands. You've also done it locally in your own community, and you yourself have built a world-class wine brand, Graciana, from nothing, but based on these principles which you just take us through. So give us the big picture perspective of how people put this into practice in a good way, the way entrepreneurs can adopt it, the growth transformations that can come of it. Give us that, here's the end result kind of view.
Yeah, it's a great question. So if a brand foundation is defined, it offers clarity about what your brand stands for, and it gives you a competitive advantage because it ensures that your internal team understands what you're aiming for, and it also clarifies for your end customer what to expect from you and how you're going to deliver it. So I've worked on hundreds and hundreds of brands over the years, built brands, refreshed brands, but your customers will relate to you better because they'll understand that you understand their needs. They will find that your brand is relevant to them, and they will clearly understand what is unique about you and what you stand for because they will understand why you are different. So they will feel your empathy, meaning they will feel that you really feel what it is that they need. And the more they feel that, the more successful you'll be because they will be drawn to your business with you because not only do you deliver product or service with the right features, but you also deliver on their emotional needs as well. And even for this highest value need, because you've gone through the exercise of why. And so you understand what it is that they need. So if you consistently deliver on your differentiated promise, you will be more successful and more profitable than those that you compete with. Likely both.
Well, good. That's a great perspective, and we thank you for it very much. I want to ask you one last question, and that is that we talk a lot about flexibility. We talk about responding to change in the marketplace because the consumer is always changing and competition is changing. The world's changing around us. So how do you deal with that constant change? I build my brand foundation. I've got all of my boxes and insights and promise arranged. Can I keep updating it? How do you manage the change function?
Yeah, that's a great question. So generally when you put your brand foundation together, it's going to be good for a period of time because consumers' needs are changing. They're not changing overnight, but they're not changing, and they are changing maybe over a period of 1 to 2 years. Every year you should be looking at your brand foundation and particularly looking at the core target and the core needs and insights. So are you getting information that says that things are changing, that people's needs are changing? If your core target's needs are changing, then you need to have another look at your brand foundation.
Good. So I'm keeping my eyes open and attention and listening to sentiment changes and so on. Good. So Trini, we've given our entrepreneurs a tremendous tool. Is there any way that they can get your advice, at least for a short period of time after we go on air with this episode of Economics for Entrepreneurs?
I love talking to brand owners. Brands are my business, and I am drawn to helping brands grow. So if folks need advice on how to grow their brand, they can email me. If they want mention in the headline of the mail, the Brand Foundation podcast, or they reference the podcast somehow, then I'll know where they're coming from. And also, you mentioned that my family owns Graciana Winery in Sonoma County. It is a world-class wine brand, and if this was valuable to them and they like wine, then they can go to Graciana.com and order some world-class Russian River Valley Chardonnay, Pinot Noirs, and Zinfandel. How's that for a plug?
It's a good one. I'm sure you have a very good brand foundation for Graciana.
We do.
And it's working.
Yes, it is.
It's, as you said, it was more successful and profitable than those you compete with. I hope that's correct for you. Well, Trini, thank you so much for being so generous with your consulting time and your proven structure. As I mentioned, we'll provide folks